Let's start with the GM stuff because
Okay.
like when he mentioned the poll, I didn't know that they had a Twitter poll up there, and then I hear it and I'm like, oh, I thought it was intriguing with the results.
Yeah. Who do you have the most faith in as a general manager in Detroit right now? Yzerman, Weaver, or Holmes? They did not include Scott Harrison. Understandable. He's just getting started.
Right.
Guy's just getting started. So it's funny because I would say right now, if it's just a yes or no question, do I have faith? If it's just a binary yes or no, the answer on all three is yes. Now, there's different degrees of faith, obviously, but I have faith in Steve Yzerman. Not 100% I know he's going to get it done faith. I have the most faith in Brad Holmes, but I have faith in Troy Weaver still.
No, I know. That's why I find this question interesting because you're forced to pick one, which is what we do on the radio. We force you to pick one.
Yeah, you don't.
But the question is interesting because, yeah, I agree with you. I have faith in all three. I'm not disappointed with any of the active GMs, if you will, although Scott Harris certainly active, but he's excluded from this.
There's something I call the fired position. You are not fired, but you, in my opinion, will be and should be at the end of the season. It doesn't do any good to fire a guy now. And we've talked about how coaches have gone below that line where I think they're in the fired position and they need to coach their way out of it.
Al Avila last year was in the fired position.
Al Avila, midway through the year. Hey, sorry for those of you that were early to the party. Sometimes we're late to the party. That's fine.
Well, last year was a question of when you do it because you have the draft coming up. Do you allow him to have the draft?
Yep. But we put him in a fired position. But there's been stuff like guys that have come back from the fired position. Guys that were in the fired position. I think my all-time favorite example is probably John Beilein. Was in most people's fired position. He was 1-6 in the Big Ten. They beat Michigan State, went on a run, made the NCAA tournament, and 2 Final Fours later, 2 national championship games later, he had somewhat coached his way out of it, one might say. But I don't have any of these three in the fired position, and I don't have any of the three particularly close. Even Weaver. I mean, Weaver's team right now is the furthest away, but we all know what they're up against, that he has just started. And, I mean, here's the most underrated sports move. I'll make a we didn't do, I don't know if you did, but the most underrated sports move of last year was trading Kelly Olynyk and Saban Lee for Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, because they stink, nobody's going to rave about this. Now, if they spin Bogdanovic into a first-round pick and a young player, and the first-round pick wins the lottery and the young player becomes an all-star, then the trade, they will have turned Saban Lee and Kelly Olynyk into about as much as you could reasonably, but that's already a huge win. No, that's a great trade.
It's a massive win. I mean, there's no question about it. And I think
it's a bit of a tree falls in the forest, but it's a great trade.
Yeah, and you ask yourself who's done the most with what they've had to work with so far, and who's done the least with what they have to work with so far. And it's kind of the same question because I think they've all done some things here. The approval rating for all three of those GMs is pretty high. But I'm starting to wonder if Steve Yzerman needs to drop a little bit lower. Not that I think he's ultra high, but like if his approval rating is like 99%, does he need to drop maybe to 90 or to 85 and maybe elevate Troy Weaver a little bit? But I think fans, when it comes to Troy Weaver, they need to see some progress. They need to see the team that is flirting with making the playoffs before they feel confident that he's the guy. He's made a million moves since he's been appointed the general manager of this team. And I mean, from draft one, it was just a whirlwind of moves. I'm like, okay, all right. I like what he's done. Wasn't a whole lot I didn't like from that moment until today. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to where his approval rating drops is you got to turn a corner. You've got to get this team going in the right direction. And maybe it's a shakeup at head coach, or it's a trade, or it's just getting healthy.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but something's going to have to turn this thing around.
You do hand out fair pass. A fair pass for Weaver is that what many believe is the marquee piece has been out all year in Cade Cunningham.
Yeah.
Now, I made a bold prediction that by the end of this season, we'll see Jaden Ivey as the cornerstone more than Cade Cunningham, and it's kind of unfair now because Cunningham's been out, but I'm not disappointed in Ivy. I'm certainly not disappointed in Jalen Duren. I'm not. The Kelly Olynyk trade is an incredible trade for a team that, unfortunately, like I said, tree falls in the forest. People aren't paying too much attention, but if they will either A, have Bogdanovich, or B, spin him into what you assume are going to be great assets. I mean, Saban Lee got cut. I think he's 2 teams later. I think Saban Lee went to Utah, then Philly, then Phoenix. And Olynyk, he is what he is. But, that I am not at this point disappointed in Troy Weaver to the point about thinking of making a change. Now, that's not a pass for life. And in Yzerman's case, he's got $8.5 million down in Grand Rapids. That's not a great look. It's just not.
No, it's not. So that's why you look at him. Brad Holmes is kind of the man. I mean, he's the guy that's got his team the furthest right now, and he's done it in the shortest amount of time.
Brad Holmes is the easy answer because he's got the most results.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's the bottom line. And he has been here the shortest amount of time from the 3, but the results are clear. They just had a winning record, right?
Yeah.
The thing about the other 2 is I almost think they're the same. I believe in both of them, Steve Yzerman, Troy Weaver. The gap should not be that big, if you ask me. I mean, literally.
That's why I was trying to articulate that you just said it better. Yeah.
You guys want to switch
way
seats?
better, yeah.
You guys want to switch seats for the rest of the
No,
day?
but what I was saying is, I believe in Yzerman. I don't want him to go anywhere. But really, what has he done either? The results aren't there as far as wins and losses. And Troy Weaver's, the results aren't there for wins and losses. Steve Yzerman made a coaching change. We'll see if Troy Weaver gets to make his coaching change or not. I know he hired DeCasey, but there's a possibility we can all agree that there might be a change coming up soon if things don't work out on the court.
I think Yzerman is still ahead of Weaver, and yes, the gap is narrowing. But I think one of the reasons that he is ahead is because the team has shown more promise. They've actually been more interesting to watch. In the standings, they are literally closer to making the playoffs than the Pistons are. So those are reasons why, and I do expect a big move to happen, whether through trade or free agency this offseason, to make this team a playoff team. Not just, I hope they can compete for it. No, that they will be a playoff team.